There are moments that arrive without making a sound, yet they change the way a heart sees everything that came before. This is one of those moments. The story you are about to hear is not asking you to rush toward a conclusion. It is asking you to stay still for just a little longer, because what appears obvious from a distance often hides an entirely different truth when seen up close. Don't skip. Something important is waiting for you, and every passing sentence is another piece of a picture that cannot be understood all at once. A quiet night settled over the world while countless lights disappeared one by one behind closed windows. Somewhere beneath that same sky, the person who has occupied your thoughts for longer than you admit found themselves standing at a crossroads they never expected to reach. They were not searching for excitement. They were searching for clarity. Yet clarity rarely arrives dressed the way people imagine it should. If someone had glanced at them from across the room, they would have believed they already knew the entire story. Isn't that how misunderstandings begin? A single moment. A single image. A single assumption. And suddenly an entire chapter is written without anyone reading the pages in between. That is why you must stay with this journey. Because tonight is not about proving who was right or wrong. It is about discovering what the eyes almost always miss. As the hours slipped quietly into the darkness, another person entered the scene. Their arrival was calm, almost unnoticed, like a gentle breeze moving through an open doorway. No dramatic entrance. No raised voices. Only a conversation that seemed ordinary to everyone except the two people living inside it. They spoke carefully. Not because they were hiding something, but because some conversations are too meaningful to survive careless words. There was a long pause. One of those pauses where silence carries more weight than speech itself. The person you love looked away for a moment, not toward the stranger beside them, but toward memories that refused to stay buried. Their expression changed in a way no photograph could ever fully explain. It wasn't joy alone. It wasn't sadness either. It was the look of someone realizing that yesterday could no longer decide tomorrow. And somewhere nearby, someone quietly lifted a camera. Just one picture. Only one. A single frozen second. That image would later travel farther than anyone expected. People who saw it believed they understood everything. Yet the picture captured almost nothing that truly mattered. Because photographs preserve faces. They do not preserve conversations. They preserve distance. They do not preserve intentions. They preserve a single heartbeat. Never the thousands that came before it. Don't skip. The meaning behind that picture is far different than the picture itself. The stranger sitting across from them noticed something no one else had noticed for a very long time. They gently smiled and asked a question so unexpected that even the person you love could not answer immediately. When was the last time you allowed yourself to stop pretending? The room became quiet again. Not awkward. Not uncomfortable. Just honest. For the first time in what felt like forever, they admitted something they had hidden even from themselves. They confessed how exhausting it had become carrying unanswered thoughts from one sunrise to the next. They admitted how often your name had appeared in moments when no one else was around. They admitted that certain memories refused to fade, no matter how hard they tried to convince themselves otherwise. The stranger listened. Never interrupted. Never judged. Sometimes the greatest gift another person can offer is simply becoming a safe place for truth to finally breathe. Outside, the night continued moving exactly as every other night had. Cars passed. Streetlights glowed. Windows reflected the moon. Nothing looked unusual. Yet inside that quiet conversation, something invisible was beginning to change. A burden became lighter. A question finally found words. A heart stopped running from itself. And still, the picture captured none of it. That is why appearances can become the loudest storytellers while speaking the fewest truths. Stay till the end. Because the story hidden behind that photograph is only beginning to reveal itself. As dawn slowly approached, one final exchange took place before they stood to leave. It was brief, almost too brief to notice. Yet those few quiet words would explain everything that happened throughout the night. Those words were never meant for curious strangers. They were never spoken for public eyes. They were spoken with someone else entirely in mind. Someone whose presence remained in every decision. Even while absent. And as the first light of morning touched the horizon, the photograph began finding its way into unexpected hands. But the message that followed it. That message changed everything. What those words said, and why they could only be spoken after an entire night had passed, is something you have not heard yet. A single image can travel across countless eyes in only a few moments, yet the truth it carries often arrives much later. That is where this story begins to deepen. The photograph had already started whispering its own version of events, inviting people to reach conclusions before a single word of explanation had been heard. But quiet hearts know something that hurried minds often forget. What appears complete at first glance is sometimes only the opening sentence. Don't skip, because the next few moments reveal why that picture was never the whole story. The person you love remained standing for a while after the conversation had ended. They did not rush toward the door. They did not seem eager to leave. Instead, they looked at the empty chair across from them as though they were silently thanking someone for helping them discover a truth they had carried for far too long without understanding it. Then something unexpected happened. The stranger reached into a small envelope resting on the table. It wasn't dramatic. There was no surprise for the room to witness. Just a simple photograph, one that had clearly existed long before this evening ever began. The stranger gently slid it across the table. Your person stared at it. At first they smiled. Then the smile slowly faded into quiet reflection. Not because the picture brought sadness, but because it reminded them how much time had been spent protecting feelings that deserved honesty instead of silence. There are nights that change a person's direction without changing their surroundings. This was one of those nights. Outside, nothing looked different. Inside, everything had begun to shift. The stranger spoke softly. Sometimes we spend years trying to become who everyone expects us to be, until we finally remember who we already were. Those words settled into the room like gentle rain. No one argued. No one defended themselves. There was simply a peaceful silence that only arrives after something important has finally been understood. Stay till the end. Because what happened next is the reason that photograph became so easy to misunderstand. As they prepared to leave, the stranger noticed something tucked carefully inside your person's wallet. It wasn't money. It wasn't an old receipt. It wasn't a forgotten note. It was something they had carried for much longer than anyone realized. A small picture. Not displayed for attention. Not shown to anyone else. hidden carefully where only they knew it existed. The stranger looked at it for only a second before smiling with quiet understanding. "So this is the person," they whispered. Your person didn't answer immediately. Instead, they lowered their eyes and gave the smallest nod. No explanation. No elaborate speech. Just one silent acknowledgement that said more than paragraphs ever could. In that single moment, the entire purpose of the evening became clearer. The conversation had never been about replacing someone. It had been about helping someone understand what their own heart had been trying to say all along. Yet none of that could ever be seen in the photograph. The camera captured two people sitting together. It never captured the name that remained present in every meaningful pause. It never captured the memories that quietly filled the spaces between their sentences. It never captured the realization that every answer they were searching for kept leading back to the same person. As the first morning light stretched across the sky, your person reached for their phone. Their thumb hovered over one particular conversation for several long seconds. They started typing. Stopped. Erased every word. Started again. This time the message remained. They read it once. Then twice. Then quietly pressed send. That message was unlike anything they had ever written before. It carried a truth they had hidden for far too long. And the response it received would reshape everything that followed. Something important is waiting for you. Because what appeared on the screen only moments later was completely unexpected. And it revealed that someone else had been quietly waiting for this conversation long before that unforgettable night ever began. Not every reply arrives with a sound. Some responses appear in silence first, asking the heart to notice them before the eyes ever can. The message had been sent. Nothing could be taken back now. The screen remained still, reflecting only a few quiet words that carried more courage than anyone around them could have imagined. Don't skip. Because what happened next was so subtle that almost everyone would have missed its importance. For several long moments, there was nothing. No notification. No flashing light. No immediate answer. The person you love slipped the phone into their pocket and stepped outside into the cool morning air. The world was beginning another ordinary day, yet inside them, nothing felt ordinary anymore. It was as if an invisible weight had finally been placed on the ground after being carried for far too many seasons. Then, a gentle vibration. Not loud. Not urgent. Just enough to pause their footsteps. They slowly looked at the screen. The reply contained only a few lines. Simple. Honest. Unexpectedly warm. There were no dramatic declarations. No questions filled with doubt. Instead, the message said something that instantly changed the atmosphere of the entire morning. I've been waiting for you to say this. Those words were read once. Then again. Then one more time. Each reading uncovered another layer of meaning. Waiting. Not chasing. Not demanding. Simply waiting. Sometimes love does not disappear while silence grows between two people. Sometimes it waits patiently, hoping that one honest moment will finally arrive. A quiet smile appeared. Not the kind people perform for photographs. The kind that happens naturally when a heart finally stops arguing with itself. Stay till the end. Because someone nearby noticed that smile. Across the street, a familiar figure happened to glance in their direction. It wasn't someone searching for answers. It was simply someone passing by. Yet timing has a remarkable way of placing ordinary people in extraordinary moments. That passerby saw only one thing. A smile while looking at a phone. Nothing more. But within hours, stories began forming around that single moment, just as they had around the photograph from the night before. One person guessed. Another person added details. Someone else filled in the spaces with imagination. Before long, a story existed that had never actually happened. Meanwhile, the truth remained beautifully simple. The conversation from the previous night had not pulled your person away from what mattered. It had gently guided them back toward it. As they continued walking, they reached a small park where the morning sunlight rested softly on the empty benches. They sat down without saying a word. Birds filled the silence. A gentle breeze moved through the trees. For the first time in a long while, they allowed themselves to imagine what honesty might look like if fear no longer stood in the way. Their thoughts returned to you. Not as a distant memory. Not as an unfinished chapter. But as someone whose place in their heart had quietly remained unchanged, even during seasons when neither of you understood the road ahead. Then something caught their attention. Folded carefully inside the same envelope from the previous evening was one final note they had almost forgotten to read. The handwriting was calm. Steady. Almost familiar. Across the top, only one sentence had been written. If you truly know where your heart belongs, don't let another sunrise pass without proving it. Your person stared at those words for a long time. They weren't instructions. They were a reminder. A reminder that opportunities sometimes wait quietly, but not forever. They folded the note, placed it safely inside their pocket, and looked toward the horizon with a new sense of peace. Yet they had no idea that someone else had already seen the photograph. Someone who believed they understood the entire story. And before this day was over, that misunderstanding would lead to a conversation no one expected, a conversation that would reveal why the picture was never the real message at all. There is a quiet difference between what people witness and what they truly understand. One can be captured in an instant. The other sometimes takes an entire lifetime to unfold. As the morning stretched gently across the horizon, the photograph continued to travel from one person to another, gathering assumptions with every new glance. Yet the truth remained untouched, waiting patiently for the right moment to speak for itself. Stay till the end, because the next encounter would uncover something no picture could ever contain. Your person continued walking with an unusual calm. They were no longer carrying the uncertainty that had weighed on them the night before. Instead, there was a quiet confidence, one that did not need to be announced. Sometimes the strongest decisions are the ones that make the least noise. Just as they reached a familiar corner, someone called their name. The voice wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was simply unexpected. They turned slowly. Standing only a few steps away was someone who had already seen the photograph. Their expression wasn't filled with judgment. It was filled with curiosity. I wasn't going to ask, they said gently, but everyone seems to think they already know what happened. For a brief moment, your person could have explained everything. They could have described every conversation. Every pause. Every reason. Instead, they smiled softly. Not because the question didn't matter, but because they had finally realized that some truths lose their beauty when they are spoken too soon. They answered with only a single sentence. Sometimes the most important part of a story is the part no camera ever sees. The listener grew quiet. There was something about those words that made every rumor suddenly feel much smaller. No defense. No excuses. Only peace. That peace spoke louder than any explanation could have. Don't skip. Because someone else had been quietly watching this conversation from a distance. Not hiding. Simply waiting for the right moment. An elderly woman, seated on a nearby bench with a book resting in her lap, smiled as your person walked past. She had witnessed only the ending of the exchange, yet somehow she seemed to understand far more than anyone else. As they passed her, she closed her book and spoke almost as if continuing a conversation that had begun years ago. People often chase proof, she said, when what they truly need is understanding. Your person paused. There was something familiar about those words. Almost as though life itself had chosen this stranger to repeat a lesson they were finally ready to hear. The woman continued. A photograph can preserve a face. She looked toward the morning sky. But only time can reveal a heart. Those words settled deeply. Without another sentence, your person thanked her with a quiet nod and continued on. Every step now felt different. Not faster. Not slower. Simply lighter. For the first time in a long while, they weren't wondering what everyone else believed. They were thinking about one person. You. They reached into their pocket and touched the folded note once more. Then they opened their phone. The message from earlier was still there. Below it, a new notification had appeared. Not from the stranger. Not from the person at the cafe. Not from anyone connected to the photograph. It came from someone who had quietly remained in the background of this entire story. The message contained only one line. I think there's something you deserve to see before anyone else does. There was no attachment visible. No explanation. Only those words. Your person stood completely still. A gentle breeze moved across the street. The world carried on as if nothing unusual had happened. But something inside them whispered that this was the moment everything was about to connect. Because whatever was waiting behind that message wasn't another rumor. It wasn't another misunderstanding. It was something that had been hidden long before that unforgettable night ever began, and once it was revealed, even the mysterious photograph would finally make perfect sense. The smallest messages often carry the greatest weight, especially when they arrive without explanation. Your person looked at the screen for several quiet seconds, not because they were afraid to open it, but because something deep inside whispered that whatever came next would connect pieces of a story that had never seemed to belong together. Don't skip, because this is where hidden meaning begins to rise above appearances. With one gentle touch, the message opened. There was no dramatic introduction. No urgent warning. Only a single photograph attached beneath those few simple words. At first glance, it looked completely ordinary. The same cafe. The same evening. The same table. But this picture had been taken from a different angle. And that changed everything. The first image had shown only two people sitting together. This one quietly revealed what had been just beyond the edge of the frame all along. On the table rested an old notebook, worn at the corners from years of being opened and closed. Beside it was a small envelope, already unsealed before either of them had arrived. Nothing about the scene suggested secrecy. Nothing suggested hidden intentions. Instead, it looked like two people sharing something that had been waiting to be understood for a very long time. Your person slowly zoomed in. Tucked between the pages of the notebook was a handwritten sentence. Most people would never have noticed it. But now, they could read it clearly. Some hearts spend years searching for answers they have carried within them from the beginning. They closed their eyes for a moment. Not because the words surprised them. Because they finally recognized them. Those same words had been spoken years earlier by someone who had once encouraged them never to ignore what felt quietly true. Stay till the end. Because the meaning behind that sentence was even deeper than it first appeared. The stranger from the cafe had never intended to become part of your story. Their role had been much simpler. They had become a mirror. Not someone to change your person's heart, but someone to help them see it without fear. There is a remarkable difference between meeting someone who captures your attention and meeting someone who reminds you where your attention has always belonged. That realization settled gently. It didn't rush. It didn't overwhelm. It simply became impossible to ignore. Your person looked back at the photograph one more time. This time they noticed something they had completely missed before. Near the edge of the table, almost hidden beneath a folded napkin, rested a small piece of paper. Only 2 words had been written on it. Be honest. Nothing more. No long advice. No complicated instructions. Just 2 quiet words that somehow explained the entire evening. Be honest. Honest about what had been left unsaid. Honest about what had never truly disappeared. Honest about the feelings that had survived every season of silence. A gentle smile returned, not because every question had been answered, but because the direction ahead no longer felt uncertain. Then, another notification appeared. Not a message. Not another photograph. A voice recording. Only 23 seconds long. Your person hesitated before pressing play. Somehow, they sensed that the voice on the other side wasn't about to reveal another mystery. It was about to reveal a memory. A memory connected to you in a way neither of you had fully understood until now. As they lifted the phone closer, the first few words began to play. And within seconds, they realized this recording had never been meant to stay hidden. It had been waiting for exactly this moment. What was said in those 23 seconds would gently rewrite the meaning of the entire night, and explain why the picture everyone talked about was never the real story at all. Some memories never ask to be remembered. They simply wait for the exact moment when the heart is finally ready to hear them. Your person held the phone a little closer, their thumb resting quietly over the play button. The world around them continued without interruption, but inside that single pause, time seemed to slow. Don't skip, because the next few moments reveal why that voice had remained unheard until now. The recording began with nothing more than a gentle breath. No music. No background noise. Only a calm voice that carried the warmth of someone speaking with complete sincerity. If you're listening to this. A brief silence followed. Then you've finally stopped running from what you've always known. Your person stood completely still. Those words didn't feel like advice. They felt like recognition. The voice continued. There comes a point when searching for new answers only leads you back to the oldest truth. Every sentence landed softly, yet each one reached deeper than the last. You've spent so much time wondering whether the right moment would come. Another quiet pause. Without realizing that the right moment was waiting for your courage. Your person's eyes slowly closed. Not because they were overwhelmed. Because they understood. The evening at the cafe had never been arranged to create distance. It had been arranged to remove it. Stay till the end. Because the final words of the recording changed everything. The voice spoke one last time. When you finally speak honestly, don't speak from fear of losing someone. Speak from gratitude that your heart never stopped recognizing them. The recording ended. No dramatic conclusion. No explanation. Just silence. But it was no longer the same silence. It had become peaceful. For several moments, your person simply looked toward the morning sky. The questions that had followed them for so long no longer seemed heavy. They had not received every answer. They had received something even more valuable. Direction. There are times when life doesn't place new people in our path to replace what matters. Sometimes it places gentle guides there to remind us not to forget what already matters most. As they slipped the phone back into their pocket, something unexpected caught their attention.